Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Audrey, and today we are doing a very different style of video. This channel has gone through so many different phases in its lifetime, so I figured why not throw commentary videos into the mix. So this is going to be the first time I'm doing a video in this style. Please do let me know if you have any critiques, advice, if you like these kind of videos, because if you do, I'll do more of them. This is going to be a video on something I like to call the banty phenomenon. This may or may not be an already established and studied theory. I don't know. This is just something that I found interesting and put together in my free time, which I evidently have far too much of. So, now, we are familiar with this situation. We've all seen this situation before. Somebody's wearing a band tee. Maybe they got it from Forever 21. Maybe they got it while thrifting. Maybe they got it from that ex who talks about aliens and always smelt like weed. And then somebody gets upset that this person is wearing the band tee. This can be seen happening in real life as well as in comment sections. It seems that the simple action of wearing a band tee, or really any group that is in the public eye, is an automatic invitation for people to attack the individual with levels of intensity similar to that of someone trying to solve a homicide. So all that being said, is it really that serious? That is what we're going to be discussing today. The all too common situation where an unsuspecting individual is wearing a band tee and is suddenly interrogated by people on the street or in comment sections. For some reason, something as simple as a t-shirt with a band or team's logo on it is enough to invoke an unwarranted game of trivia crack. So why does this happen? Obviously, the simple answer is that people are not fond of bandwagoners, and they want to verify that the person is worthy enough to be wearing a shirt with a band logo on it. This leads to unsuspecting individuals being bombarded with oddly specific questions regarding the band or team that is on their apparel. A rite of passage ritual which always sparks discourse on whether or not somebody should be allowed to wear merch of a group that they are not actually fans of. Now, what is the right answer to this question? Should someone be allowed to wear a Pink Floyd t-shirt if they don't know the band members' names? Should somebody be allowed to wear a hat with a sports logo on it if they don't know the coach's blood type? That is exactly what we'll be going over today. And I hope we can gain some clarity on this age-old problem. Now, we need to start with some history by looking into the past and seeing how group dynamics have evolved and functioned over time. I'm going to be referencing one of my all-time favorite books, The Righteous Mind. Although this book isn't directly related to the topic of this video, it does offer some great insight on the history of groups and why humans like groups. In the chapter titled Why Are We So Groupish, the author states his own definition of the term groupish. He says, "When I say that human nature is also groupish, I mean that our minds contain a variety of mental mechanisms that make us adept at promoting our group's interests in competition with other groups." He proposes this idea as a precursor to the theory of group evolution, but we won't be getting into all that today. Basically, what this means is that humans have an innate ability to form and defend groups. In the same chapter, the author says, "Early humans domesticated themselves when they began to select friends and partners based on their ability to live within the tribe's moral matrix." Now, a moral matrix is a term used to describe morals, beliefs, values that individuals or groups may share and have agreed to abide by. If your personal moral matrix lines up with that of a group's, you will most likely be interested in joining that group. Once an individual decides to join a group, they will often adopt the values, beliefs, and behaviors of the group, including any symbolic markers that the group may use to identify themselves. The use of symbolic markers to identify with groups or cultures has been seen throughout history and is still prevalent today. From Native American headdresses to the tattoos and piercings of the alternative scene. Human beings take extraordinary, costly, and sometimes painful steps to make their bodies advertise their group memberships. These symbolic markers are used to create a physical sense of we within the group. This is useful as it is also stated, we trust and cooperate more readily with people who look and sound like us. We expect them to share our values and norms. Now, this right here is a very important statement for the topic of this video. In order for groups to really establish a sense of community, they use symbolic markers such as branded merchandise to show others within the same group or even outsiders that they are in fact a part of said group. It is easier than ever due to social media to have a very general but vast understanding of many different groups we aren't even a part of. So we can often recognize certain symbolic markers as belonging to a certain group, and that leads us to have a general understanding of what beliefs or values that person may have. For example, if someone is wearing a cross, you can assume that they practice some form of Christianity. So, physical markers have certain qualities associated with them that allow people to more easily identify those they may share similar beliefs with. One thing that comes along with having symbolic markers is that they often will develop some level of sanctity, which is the state or quality of being holy, sacred, or saintly. Most groups and cultures have certain symbolic markers that they deem sacred and hold to a higher standard of treatment than ordinary objects. For example, here in the US, the American flag is seen as sacred and it is handled in a very specific manner due to its status here in this country. Although most sacred symbols belong to religions, it's not uncommon to see other symbols that belong to groups fall on the same spectrum, even if it's to a lesser extent. Any symbolic marker that falls on the sanctity spectrum is going to help influence loyalty within whatever group it belongs to. This behavior can fall under the term shared intentionality. This is known as an agreement among people who share a joint representation of things in their world and who share a set of conventions for communicating with each other about those things. Humans construct moral communities out of shared norms, institutions, and gods that, even in the 21st century, they fight, kill, and die to defend. Now, I'm not saying that people are going to be willing to die for their favorite band, but more times than not, they are more than willing to defend and fight for it. If we recall the previously mentioned idea of sanctity and how certain symbolic markers have some level of sanctity to them within the group they belong to, it's easier to see what is really happening when someone is getting after someone else for wearing a band tee that they may not have substantial knowledge on. In regards to the band that is on the t-shirt. In this case, the band tee is the symbolic marker that helps tie the individual in with the group it belongs to. Or in this case, we can say fan base. It's a way to show others what group they belong to, and it makes it easier for people who may even be in the same group to identify one of their own, in a sense. Or in other words, they can expect to have some level of shared interest with this person. Although you could say that purchasing and wearing merchandise is just a way of supporting the band or team it belongs to, at the end of the day, if you're willing to spend your own money to purchase a branded material object, then you most likely have some level of identification with that group. So now we know that symbolic markers are used by members of a group to physically showcase what group they belong to. When someone identifies with a certain symbolic marking that belongs to a group, chances are they also identify with that group's moral matrix. This moral matrix is made up of values, beliefs, behaviors that the members of the group may be privy to and live by. These practices often hold some level of sanctity within the group they belong to because they are seen as exclusive shared interests. Referring back to evolution, we can see that stronger groups had a higher survival rate than the smaller, weaker groups. The stronger groups were often bonded together by shared moral matrices, and shared intentionality. The biologists Bert Holdobler and E.O. Wilson summarize I don't know much about socializing, so I'm having a hard time saying this word, which is animals that live in large groups that have internal structure. In this quote, it is said that in all the known species that display the earliest stages of eusociality, their behavior protects a persistent defensible resource from predators, parasites, or competitors. Although this quote is referring to species outside of the human race, I still find that it poses an interesting general idea that groups are more likely to work together if they have a shared interest to defend. Now, this brings us to the idea of a hive mind. The author of The Righteous Mind poses the idea of a hive switch, which exists within the human mind. This is the switch that allows humans to live mostly selfish and individualistic lives until the group that they belong to is threatened. The hive switch is an adaptation for making groups more cohesive and therefore more successful in competition with other groups. While researching the cause of such a switch, it was found that the hormone oxytocin plays a part. Oxytocin is released in response to activation of sensory nerves during labor, breastfeeding, and sexual activity. In addition, oxytocin is released in response to low-intensity stimulation of skin, in response to touch, stroking, warm temperature, etc. This hormone is often referred to as the love hormone because of the fact it plays such an active role in bonding humans together. So, oxytocin bonds humans to one another and their groups, causing them to have a stronger emotional reaction in regards to defending that group, or defending their nest from predators, parasites, and competitors, as previously mentioned. The general basis of the hive switch is that once humans are bonded together in a group setting, they can still live individual lives outside of that group, but once that group is threatened, they will come together to defend it. Now, when we apply these concepts to modern day problems, such as the Banty phenomenon, we see that predators and parasites can be loosely associated with Darwin's theory of the free rider problem. Although this theory has been widely disputed, I think there is an important general theme here that can apply to our discussion. Darwin's theory posed that free riders were individuals who appeared to be a part of a group, but when it came down to it, were unwilling or unable to act as a whole within that group. For a while, this theory actually halted the idea of group evolution because the free riders would often avoid the dangerous, life-threatening situations that more die-hard members of the group would find themselves facing often. And this would lead to the free riders surviving, whereas the actual participating group members would die. But that's a bit drastic for our topic today. Now, I bet Darwin's free rider problem sounds a bit familiar. While reading about this theory, I couldn't help but draw parallels between his free rider problem and what we know today as bandwagoners, posers, you know. You could argue that this is why gatekeeping exists. Maybe I could do a whole nother video on that. We'll see. The main difference being that bandwagoning usually doesn't occur in life-threatening situations, but it still involves individuals benefiting from group efforts with little to no participation on their end. Though eventually groups evolved to recognize any free riders and promptly remove them from the group. They said, "You can't sit with us." Sorry. To recap what we've gone over so far, humans have the innate ability to bond and form groups based off of shared intentionality and moral matrices. Should I have looked up how to say that beforehand? Maybe I should have, but I didn't. This leads to the development of symbolic markers that people within the group use to identify with the group in a physical manner. These symbolic markers are often representative of that specific group's moral matrix. The symbols shared by the group often develop a level of sanctity because they are used to show one's loyalty to said group. People within a group form emotional bonds that strengthen their need and will to defend and protect their group from free riders, competitors, and general threats. And although members of a group can still act as an individual outside of the group, they will always jump to action when their group is threatened. All right? Do we get all that? Do we understand? Good. Now, if we refer back to section 2 of this video, you will remember that I referred to a Banty as a symbolic marker, thus meaning it holds some level of sanctity to the group it belongs to, or fan base. In this context, they're interchangeable. Now, you're probably able to connect the dots that someone using a group's symbolic markers, even without malice intent, is seen as disrespectful by that group. Perhaps this is a more widespread and severe issue that you should probably think about. We'll come back to it, but think about it. Let that fester in your mind. A symbolic marker is meant to identify someone who holds and shares the same values and beliefs as someone within a specific group. So that way, members of that same group can easily identify people that they will get along with or have a shared interest with. Some level of shared understanding. You know? When these symbolic markers are misused by individuals outside of a group, they are often seen as a free rider or a bandwagoner or a cultural appropriator. Sorry. Did you hear something? This is because the individual appears to be benefiting from the use of this symbolic marker without any real dedication to the group it belongs to. Of course, there are different levels of severity when it comes to this general theme we're discussing here, and the band-tee phenomenon is on the less severe side for sure. But I hope you guys are able to draw some parallels between what we are talking about in this video and other more severe problems such as cultural appropriation. Now, I do not believe I have the right or experience or knowledge to speak on that topic in detail, but I just wanted to bring that up with you guys because the theme of this video can very much be applied to the topic of cultural appropriation. So let's keep that in mind. Maybe we can learn something beyond just band-tees. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Now, let's really paint the picture of the band-tee phenomenon using everything that we just learned. In this case, the group can be referred to as a fan base, to keep things simple. When bands or artists rise in popularity, they inevitably develop a fan base. The fan base consists of people who have a shared interest in the band or artist's music. In order to better identify with the fan base and their common interest, an individual might buy a band-tee. On top of this, an individual may also adopt the fanbase's moral matrix, which consists of beliefs and values based off of that band or artist. These could be inside jokes, certain references, or just general knowledge of the band or artist. Do I have to say both every time? I'm just going to say band from now on. But also like things like sports teams and stuff can be included, but I'm just specifically, like I said, this is a general theme that can be applied to many problems, so I'm just going to refer to it as a band. Band, okay? Having knowledge in regards to the fan base's moral matrix allows individuals to form an emotional bond, not only to the band, but also to the group that surrounds it. This leads us back to the original question, which is, why do people give such emotionally charged responses to something as simple as a person wearing a band-tee? Well, there are more than one reasons that could explain these emotionally volatile reactions, and I think you can start to guess some of them. First of all, when you belong to a group and you see another individual with your group's symbolic marking, aka a band-tee, you get excited and assume that you can have some level of shared interest with this person. And many friendships are formed through encounters just like this. Which makes sense because symbolic markers are used to be indicative of someone's group affiliations. So when this individual doesn't actually belong to the group that they're representing, intentionally or unintentionally, it can be rather disappointing to those who may actually belong to the group because they saw a potential friendship, maybe, that could have been forged off of the shared interest of this group. Humans are just such simple creatures, aren't we? Now, if this disappointment happens or is seen happening rather frequently, that is what leads to the more aggressive reaction of deciding to become an amateur police interrogator. Maybe they went to the same police academy that Toby went to in Pretty Little Liars. Becomeacop.com? Sorry. Now, this excessive interrogating happens because the group member senses a bandwagoner or a poser, and they want to girl boss gaslit gate. Girl boss gaslight gate. I am so sorry. Let me calm down. Okay. But yes, when the member senses that they may be dealing with a bandwagoner, the initial response is to gatekeep in a way. By doing this, the member of the group feels as if they are defending and protecting their group from a possible free rider. This defense usually involves rigorous questioning of the individual, and if they fail to pass, then they are most likely going to be ridiculed. We've seen this time and time again, right? Whether it's actually happened to you or whether you see it in comment sections of teenage girls who happen to be wearing a Def Leppard t-shirt and their comments look like a Google search bar with all these middle-aged men asking questions. It's like, well, sir, why are you down there asking questions? Because it seems to me you're the one who doesn't know this information. Now at a surface level, this may seem a bit ridiculous. It may seem a little bit like overkill. But it's important to remember that the human brain has evolved over time to have innate reactions to certain stimuli. Although it is important to also remember that these innate reactions are now being applied to much more trivial circumstance. The innate response to fight for our group against free riders was developed to help increase the group's survival rate in life-threatening situations. Since we still have that innate response, but encounter a lot less life-or-death situations, we subconsciously end up applying this response to much less drastic stimuli. And this can lead to things such as the infamous band tea phenomenon that we are talking about in today's video. Although the threat seems very unimportant and almost non-existent, the personal emotional response to the so-called threat can feel a lot more intense. Now, of course, this isn't just due to how the human mind evolved over time and our basic survival instincts, but they do play a large part in why this problem is seen over and over and over again, even if we are aware of it. It's very hard to shake those silly little mechanisms that evolved over time, like self-esteem. Fun fact, did you know that self-esteem was developed way back when so that you could identify what behaviors groups were participating in order to be better accepted into that group, because individuals who belonged to groups had a higher rate of survival? But then, of course, we started developing at a much faster rate that the human mind can't evolve as quickly. So we still have those stupid responses like self-esteem, but now we aren't applying it to our survival rate. We're just replying it to like fucking Becky and her friends and what they think of our most recent Instagram post. And oh no, it only got 200 likes. Whatever will happen. Oh my goodness. Isn't that just upsetting to hear? Oh boy, was I upset. We're due for an update. Come on. Windows 98 up in here. It's not working out. Now, I do also believe that we have such a aggressive response to bandwagoners and posers is oftentimes because these bandwagoners don't have any real knowledge of the group that they may be associating themselves with, whether it's on purpose or by accident. They are still in the public eye being seen as a part of a group. And if they don't have any real substantial knowledge on this group, now what ends up happening is this group can be widely misrepresented, especially if the person in question is of celebrity status. A great example of this is feminism. You see so many people identifying themselves as feminists without actually knowing anything about the term and its origins and what it actually stands for. And because of this, now there are so many different meanings of feminism, and people form their opinions off of an entire group based off of maybe just one person that they know is affiliated with that group. And this person may not even be qualified to be affiliated with this group. Sorry. Like I said, this topic that we're talking about in this video can be applied to many different situations, and wearing a band tee is definitely one of the less important ones, but I still found that it was a very interesting way and maybe less intense way to look at a very common problem that we see in our day-to-day lives. It's all over the place. So maybe we should gatekeep. Is this a pro-gatekeeping? Is this pro-gatekeeping propaganda? Maybe it is. I didn't intend for this to be the outcome, but honestly, if the shoe fits, no, but I'm just saying that's why people have very strong reactions, even if they aren't warranted, because how do you know? How do you know if, Becky doing the renegade on her TikTok wearing a Nirvana shirt, how do you know she doesn't know anything about the band? It's funny because how come it's okay to question someone's knowledge about that, and like you don't do that with other things? Oh my gosh, this is feeding into I'm about to go on a tangent here. Our generation especially has massive trust issues. Raise your hand if you got some trust issues, and not only on an individual level, but I guess now it's translated into group settings. As much fun as it is to want to welcome new people into our groups that we love and cherish so much, it's also scary knowing that now they can identify publicly with this group, and you want to make sure that they have the information readily available to defend the group's image. Does any of this make sense? Sometimes I just say words. Crazy how that works, right? All right, so in conclusion, what did we learn? Well, personally, I've been learning that there are very, very complex reasons behind behaviors that seem so silly. Who would have thought so much goes into someone's reaction over someone else wearing a band tee? Am I right? But I think it's fascinating. I think it's so cool that humans have evolved to the point where we no longer have to use our survival mechanisms to survive. Now we just use them to thrive? If you're lucky, if you're part of the top 1%, okay, I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was super fun to make. I'm not very good at this style of video yet. Also, I decided to stand against this blank wall. I find that if I'm standing, it's easier for me to talk. I was kind of sad because this background is so plain, and I wanted to have one of those big pointy things that I could point at stuff, but then again, what would I even be pointing at? I don't know. So let's sum it up. Can you wear a band tee with no real knowledge of the band? I don't care. You would think that I care because I put all this time and effort into making this video, but I really don't care. I mean, if you're going to be obnoxious about it, then maybe I do care. If you're going to walk around and claim to be a band's biggest fan and wear all their merch and stuff and then not even know any of their songs, well, that's more of why are you personally okay with doing that? So yeah, at the end of the day, do what you want. As long as you're not hurting anyone or going out of your way to be a public nuisance, then I think it's fine. And I think some people just have to get off their high horses and realize berating a 16-year-old girl in her TikTok comments is not going to solve the issue that you're so worried about. Instead, we really should try to keep up the attitude that it's exciting when people start to become interested in things that we are also interested in. And even if someone has no clue what the band is that they are representing, maybe you can recommend some of their music and say, hey, that's actually a really good band. You should check them out. Instead of just, if you give someone PTSD associated with a band, then oh boy, you're taking away you're being mean. You're being mean. That's what it boils down to. You're being mean. But what does matter are topics that we briefly mentioned, such as cultural appropriation and widespread misrepresentation of groups. That's where this topic gets a little more tricky because those are things that you shouldn't do. I hope we learned something. I hope we had fun. I hope this video somewhat cohesive. I have a hard time making things cohesive. So I think I covered everything I want to cover. Feel free to start some friendly discourse in the comments. If you have any questions, concerns, things you'd like to share with the class, do comment it down below. But for the sake of irony, feel free to comment down below asking me multiple questions about all the band tees I was wearing in this video. All right, that's all I have to share. So feel free to check out some other videos on my channel. Check out my links in the description. Comment down below if you have a topic that's been heavy on your mind that you'd like me to cover in a video sometime. And I will see you guys in the next one.